What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com, live on Facebook with the news that many Packers fans have been waiting for quite a while. The Packers, it is confirmed by our Tom Silverstein, have fired defensive coordinator Dom Capers. Obviously, like I said, a lot of Packer fans have been waiting for this moment for a long time. Capers will always be a well-respected coach, godfather of the zone blitz, in Green Bay to help them usher in another Lombardi championship, bringing the Lombardi trophy home back in 2010. But obviously, the last few years, not up to snuff. Mike McCarthy making the move. And now, the question is, who will replace Capers and what kind of scheme will they bring to Green Bay? Now, Tom reported just a little while ago that Darren Perry will get consideration, the safeties coach for the Packers, which would, lead you to believe that they are open to keeping the scheme and or at least principles, type, maybe 3-4 front, etc. You would think Perry would most likely run a similar scheme to what Capers ran. Capers brought Perry over from Pittsburgh back when they used to run the same scheme with Dick LeBeau. So Capers out. The search begins for a new defensive coordinator. You have to think McCarthy will cast a wide net looking for and at as many different available candidates over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours. And here's the other thing. There are a number of positions come open, 5, I believe, as of right now in the NFL, head coaching-wise. That includes Bruce Arians retiring down in Arizona. So there are a lot of people looking for work, and there are a lot of staffs that are going to be picked over and or rated, and there are going to be a lot of people hiring. So, as I said here last week on Facebook, Mike McCarthy is going to have to move, and I think that's one of the reasons he didn't hesitate and he didn't wait. There was always a possibility that McCarthy would wait a day or two after going through a review, his year-end review, as he does every year, and he indicated to us that he would be doing so today and tomorrow. So I wouldn't have been surprised if he had waited, but he did not wait, reportedly making the move last night, which tells you he wants to get ahead of this and get a start at looking whoever might end up being the eventual replacement for Dom Capers. But there you go, all the latest that we have. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com by the minute throughout the day and throughout the week for the defensive coordinator search, which is about to commence. So I see tons of questions here, tons of comments, so let's get to them. Eric says, should have happened years ago. I know there's lots of people who would share in that sentiment. I don't think anyone would deny it, but Mike McCarthy's opinion was the only one that mattered, and he wanted to stick with him. He didn't want to make a decision that he thought might come back to haunt him. You never really know what you're getting when you change staffs. McCarthy's not one to throw people under the bus, unlike people we've seen around the league throughout the years. So the argument definitely can be made that he should have been let go some time ago, but the move has finally been made. Byron, saying not sure he was to blame. I think you could make a case that he was up against it personnel-wise, but I also think the tape doesn't lie, and the preparation and or execution of his defense was just not up to snuff week in and week out, especially this year. I think you go back to the last year as well. But this year, there were way too many communication errors, way too many issues with personnel, getting guys on and off the field, which isn't a talent thing. That's just an organizational thing. And, I think McCarthy at some point this year probably thought, as he indicated in his press conferences 2 weeks ago when he said he needed to look at patterns of negativity. Well, there was definitely a pattern on the defensive side of the ball, and that was, disorganization, giving up way too many yards easily, way too many uncontested plays. That's just not a hallmark of a good, sound, well-coached defense. How much power does Mike McCarthy have on decisions for the defensive coordinator over Thompson? He has all the power. He will be making the hire. Thompson will suggest things. McCarthy will undoubtedly ask him his advice and or counsel on certain candidates, but it is Mike McCarthy's decision. At the end of the day, the buck stops with him when it comes to his staff. Too complex for young players. Randall, I would agree for the most part, and the problem being twofold, that They were playing a lot of young guys at the beginning of the year prior to people getting hurt. And then when those guys got hurt, young, inexperienced guys who weren't as talented had to come in and learn and play on the fly. So it's just a bad combination all around there. The talent was better in 2010 on defense than it is now. Just facts. I would absolutely agree with that sentiment. But it is still a bottom line business, and it is still your job as a defensive coordinator to mitigate that issue. What about the continuous injuries, D? That will undoubtedly be something McCarthy looks at this offseason. Now, whether it's a strength and conditioning issue, which I don't really think it is, and or just a looking at who and when they draft and trying to find players without injury histories that have maybe continued on into the NFL, that's a long, meticulous process the Packers will go through undoubtedly starting today. They all need to go a complete cleaning of house. Josh, that is one way. Losing in Green Bay is unacceptable. I love that. I love that mentality. It's unacceptable. It's 1 year. They went 7-9 because their franchise quarterback got hurt. So it's unacceptable is something that's easy to type out. But when you're in charge of a multi-billion-dollar operation, as Mark Murphy is, you got to take the long view. And this team has made the playoffs 8 years in a row. You don't just fire everybody because you missed a year because your franchise player got hurt. Go outside the organization, please. Steve, it's interesting. I'm of that opinion as well. I think they need entirely fresh blood and a complete new voice. But Tom indicating that Darren Perry will get consideration lets you know that they're going to look in-house as well. And I think that is not the best idea, but it is Mike McCarthy's call. Defensive line priority in the first round? I don't think it's priority, but I tell you what, sitting where they're sitting, as far as draft position, just outside the top 10, they could get a very good defensive lineman. The history books show you, really good. There have been a succession of really good defensive linemen that have fallen outside the top 10. Whether it's Star Tulele in Carolina, whether it's Haloti Ngata back when he was with the Ravens, whether it's Aaron Donald, who went 13th to the Rams. I mean, there have been a lot of really good defensive linemen that have been taken around that area. So if somebody were to fall again, then I think the Packers would, not hesitate to scoop him up. Now, that said, I think more than anything, they need to look at the pass rush. They need to find someone who can put pressure on the quarterback from the outside. But part of that will be what kind of scheme they're running, which is something we don't know at this moment. What's the NFL doing with the Rodgers issue as far as his move back to IR? Nothing. That was just a lot of pomp and circumstance. Teams undoubtedly did complain, and ESPN obviously ran with the story. But teams do what the Packers did as far as placing Rodgers on IR every single year. And the funny thing is that the thing that nobody really talked about when it happened, we talked about it here on Facebook, but when Rodgers was placed on IR, the league had to approve it. The league can't then turn around and mandate the Packers cut Aaron Rodgers for a move that they approved. That was never going to happen. Now that Capers is on toast, will the teal curtain be the new D-line for... No, I don't think so. If they bring in someone from outside, depending on where he comes from, what are the odds he would lobby to bring in some of his former players? I'm sure whoever it would be would obviously like to have guys that he's familiar with, who know his scheme. And sometimes personnel groups will do that. Well, they'll bring in, say, a veteran safety who knows all the calls and checks, what have you. I would tend to think Ted and his group would be a little less amiable to acquiescing to their wishes, but I'm sure they'll listen. And I would tend to think they'll most likely try to, if it is a complete scheme overhaul, you would think they would want to listen to whoever the new guy is and let him have at least one or two of his guys to help implement the scheme. Let's see. Oh, this is interesting. NFL Network reporting that the Lions have requested permission to interview Winston Moss, the assistant head coach and linebackers coach for the Packers. Winston Moss, back in the day, had interviews with the Rams and Raiders, and now apparently will be interviewing with the Lions. That's provided the Packers allow the possibility. Del Rio is a possibility. He could be. It's been a long time since Del Rio was a coordinator. Not a long time. I mean, it's been a while. I don't know his history with McCarthy. I can't recall McCarthy kind of saying anything about Del Rio or his scheme. I guess it's a possibility, but I would tend to think they would. I mean, somebody like Gus Bradley or Vic Fangio, I think, would be more likely. But he's obviously got a track record. He's obviously a good coach, and you can't discount those. Do you think it's important for coordinators to be on the sideline? Chris, not necessarily. Each guy works different and has a reason for doing so. I tend to think on defense, which is more reactionary and a little bit more, I don't want to say emotional, but it is. They feed off read and react. And if you have a guy on the sideline tearing into you, getting you going, maybe there's something to that. But, if you can operate from the booth and you see the game better that way as a play caller, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Matt, Ravens DC retired or fired? He retired. Dean Pease announced his retirement this morning. He was an outstanding coordinator, and that's a place they probably have an in-house guy that they'll move up, but they could be looking as well. So, and that's when, like I said before, another reason why McCarthy needed to make this move quickly. Let's see, Jimmy Leonard, Michelle. I know that's a very popular sentiment in Wisconsin, but I tend to think that Jim is going to have to work his way up through the coaching ranks. I've been talking about that with a lot of people, and I can't remember a single coordinator at the college level who jumped to the coordinator of an NFL team. It just hasn't happened. It's a big, big jump. I do think he will be coaching in the NFL sooner rather than later, but I can't imagine the Packers going that route. And I am so relieved. Virginia, I think you and a lot of Packers fans are there. What's your thoughts on trying to trade Perry? If you mean Nick Perry, I don't think so. I mean, they just paid the guy, and yes, he went through an injury-riddled year that ended disappointingly, and he was a bit of a disappointment production-wise, but they just paid the guy a lot of money. I don't imagine anyone's going to trade for that contract, especially coming off a year that was riddled with injuries. Does coach money go against the salary cap? No, Will, it does not. Bill, what about a good tight end? Yeah, absolutely. I think tight end will be a priority in the draft. It's a position they've basically got to start over at. Would Whip be kept around again? Matt, he could be. Sounds like the whole staff is probably being let go, which would indicate a clean sweep and a complete overhaul, but that's not confirmed yet. I would tend to think they would want to keep Whit around, but that would really be at the discretion of whoever they hire to be coordinator. Now, maybe Whit gets an interview to be, for the coordinator spot, but we'll see. Doesn't seem like there's a top-tier guy for DC. We might get a slight improvement. I very much disagree. I think Vic Fangio would be a major upgrade over Dom Capers. Keep Perry and let Matthews go clear up some money. I think they'll restructure him, but I never think it's a good idea to just let your good football players go just to save some money. The salary cap's going up every year. They've got the space. Just getting rid of good football players to clear cap space is an odd way to go about things. Rex Ryan to Green Bay needs some flavor. I think 5 years ago that would have made sense. Now the game has passed him. He's comfy in a TV studio, and I can't imagine Mike McCarthy inviting that into his locker room. Why they need to keep McCarthy around? Because he's a good football coach, Andrew. I know everyone doesn't agree on that, but he is indeed. And I think next year will show how good he really is. We need a veteran at safety to guide all the young talent. Well, they have Morgan Burnett, who's set to be a free agent, but essentially when he is in there and and not playing injured, that's what he's done. The first part of this year, I thought he played very well and did a very good job of getting guys kind of in and out of things. But as we saw, when he got injured, that's when really these things started to fall apart on the defensive side of the ball. Even Lovie Smith would be an upgrade. Lovie Smith's a good coach. Is Ted Thompson's job safe? I assume so. You never know. It could be a shock, but yeah, I think so. Ted Cruz to Green Bay as strength and conditioning. Oh, Terry Cruz. That's funny. I hear Darren Perry's thought to be the next DC. Well, he will be in consideration. He will be interviewed, but that doesn't mean that he's got the leg up on anybody, other than the fact that Mike has worked with him every day for the past few years. Most teams play a sub package of a nickel nowadays. Taylor, if you were watching our Facebook Live prior to the game yesterday, you'll know that's exactly what Ryan and I were talking about. People throw out they got to be 4-3 or they got to be 3-4. You know, you're going to have different principles no matter who you bring in. Obviously, they're going to run their base principles off of a 4-3 or a 3-4. But in this league where teams are going 3-4 wide receivers, spreading it out, down in and down out, most teams are in nickel packages 75 to 80% of the time. So you call it a 4-3, call it a 3-4, call it what you want. You got to be multiple because most of the time you're going to be in sub. That's just the reality of the NFL these days. Another big splash in free agency. I doubt that's coming anytime soon. Who wins the Super Bowl? Not allowed to say Vikings. Oh, John, well, I think the Vikings got a good chance. So, Indy head coach or Cincy defensive coordinator for the new defensive coordinator for the Pack? Well, the Cincy defensive coordinator, Paul Guenther, is most likely going to get consideration to be the head coach in Cincinnati. As far as Chuck Pagano, maybe. I don't really see McCarthy going that way. I don't think he has any ties to Pagano. But perhaps there's something there as far as his work as a defensive coach that McCarthy would be attracted to, but that's not a name that I've really seen readily connected at all. Rodgers should not sign an extension until Ted Thompson shows a commitment to winning. I love these comments. You mean like giving him a fantastic offensive line, paying 3 wide receivers close to $40 million next year? Brett Favre would have killed to get half the stuff that Ted Thompson has provided to Aaron Rodgers. And yet people sit here and say that Ted Thompson doesn't want to win. It just blows me away. Ted Thompson wants to win worse than any other human being on the planet. Just because he doesn't go about it the way you and I would, or any other GM would, or doesn't express himself publicly, doesn't rant and rave, doesn't talk about anything with the press for 9 months, doesn't mean the guy doesn't want to win. The guy wants to win. This idea that he's not committed to winning is the height of silliness. What's the timeline on when we might find out about the DC job? I think you will probably hear they'll have guys lined up to interview throughout this week. I would tend to think they'll get a hire done in the next 4 or 5 days. Now, maybe there's somebody in the playoffs that they're going to be talking to that they want to wait on. I doubt that, but I would tend to think, within the next week or so. Virginia, he doesn't want to spend. Are you talking about Ted Thompson? The man who just gave Devontae Adams and Corey Linsley contract extensions? Everybody says he doesn't want to spend because he spends on his own guys. But if either Adams or Linsley had hit the market, they would have been top free agents. So you can't say he doesn't want to spend. He just wants to spend on his own guys. The bottom line is Ted hasn't provided quality defensive personnel. Now there you have a leg to stand on, and that is a fair criticism of Thompson. He has used a lot of draft capital to try and fix his defense, and he has whiffed more often than not. Now, he's gotten some hits lately. You can't deny that. Demarius Randall is finally rounding into shape. Kenny Clark is on the verge of stardom. Mike Daniels is a very good player. So you can't say he's been completely bereft of providing that talent. But there has been, for every hit, there have been definitely way, way, way more misses. And that is something that needs to change. And it seems to be, with Martinez maturing, there's talent there. It's just a question of finding a difference maker, which he has not done. Then that has been the big, big problem on the defensive side of the ball in Green Bay. All right, everybody, I'll take 1 or 2 more, and then I got to jump. Randy, everyone's just got an opinion, man. Doesn't mean it's smart or dumb. It's just their opinion. The players are better than the sum of the parts. I'd agree with that, Randall. Who from Seattle is available? Love their aggressive defense. Well, that's a good question. It sounds like Pete Carroll may retire, so who knows what's going to happen there. May be thrown wide open out of Seattle. Martinez showed out this year, in my opinion. I agree, Zach. needs to hit on an edge rusher, Levi, absolutely a number one. Whether they're playing a 4-3 or a 3-4, they have to find someone who can bring it off the edge, win a one-on-one, and cause problems for an offense. Because right now, they haven't had that in a very long time. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Dom Capers out as the defensive coordinator for the Packers. We will see what is in store as far as who they hire next. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com. We have an initial story up. We'll be updating it throughout the day as more information becomes available. Make sure you check it out, PackersNews.com, for all the latest on Green Bay, both today and into the offseason. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good day.